Hey, folks, welcome to the Battles of the First World War podcast. Joining the podcast today is Andrew Lucas, who, together with Jürgen Schmiseschek, wrote the book Fighting the Kaiser's War, The Saxons in Flanders, 1914 through 1918. Jürgen is unable to join us this afternoon, but we'll give his bio here and then we'll speak with Andy. So Jürgen Schmiseschek was born in 1959, has lived in Dresden all his life, and worked as a layout artist. His first visit to Flanders in 1994 inspired his interest in the Great War, particularly as experienced by his fellow Saxons, and he began amassing the extraordinary collection which forms the basis of this book. In his own translated words, it is a strange but uplifting feeling to hold these almost 100-year-old photos, diaries, and letters from the field in one's hands. And naturally, I am anxious to find out more about these people, their experiences, and the places and circumstances in which they lived and died. This includes visiting the old theaters of war. I'm particularly fond of Flanders, although there was more left to marvel at elsewhere, the Vosges or the Masurian Lakes. Through his collecting and researching, he has made many friends in many countries and contributed to book projects in German, Flemish, and English. And so now we'll go to speaking with Andrew. So, Andrew, welcome to the podcast. And thank you so much
Hello,
for taking time to come on the podcast this evening.
my pleasure.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am mostly English, but what started this project is the fact that I have one German grandmother
Okay.
whose father was in the Royal Saxon Army as an artilleryman. And that is essentially where my interest comes from. I was born in 1975 in Nottingham.
Okay.
I hold a master's degree in English, so not a historian. This is my hobby.
Hmm.
My father is also a writer on First World War subjects. He has put out several books on the British side, based on that side of our family history. And thanks to my collaboration with Jürgen, I have now put out two books in English and one in German on the Saxons specifically. I'm also a reenactor, and I just last year started getting my feet wet in battlefield tour guiding, which is something I really want to do more of in future.
Oh, now you said you're part of Zeitgeist tours.
I they tried me out.
Oh, okay.
They've not given me any more work since, so I'm hoping for work from other channels. So that was fun. Um, and reenactment, I primarily acted through the 1914 to 21 Society, though I'd not been out for some years. I'm hoping to do a lot more next year.
Hmm.
And lately, I've been doing things with Andy Robertshaw's gang, the Centre for Experimental Military Archaeology at Detling.
Oh, have you really?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, that's so cool. When they started that, they came on the podcast here to talk about it. So that's
Oh
wow.
well, they like having volunteers. So
Oh,
if you're
that's
prepared to go and be German in their trench for free, then Andy will be very grateful to you. There are snacks and everything.
oh nice. Period snacks or more modern snacks?
No, modern ones to eat them so that the public don't see you. But I have high standards for these things. I fret about looking wrong in front of the public.
Sure. Sure. I'd be fretting about like what the snacks were. Like is it like bully beef and hardtack, or are we
No,
talking
it's
about
crisps and things, but
like
I'd be prepared to eat authentic German rations. But my God, that would be arduous. That would be quite a harsh living history activity. I
right.
should like to be able to show the public what the Germans ate in 1918. It would be quite shocking to them, I'm sure.
Gosh,
Mm.
yeah. Yeah, the idea of I'm a big fan of bread, but the idea of like turnip bread, like, oh man, I don't know. Like it's
Mm.
um
Yeah, the dried vegetables that they nicknamed barbed wire were no fun.
Wow. Oh man, I can't even imagine. That's incredibly descriptive. Just just knowing barbed wire.
Stacheldraht.
What was it called again?
Stacheldraht. That's
Stackeldraht.
barbed wire.
That's barbed wire. Okay.
Mm.
Oh my God. All right. So, but before we get way off topic on the subject of food, we will talk about your book, Fighting the Kaiser's War. So
Yes.
first question for you, Andrew, is Saxony is one of the four kingdoms in the German Second Reich that could maintain its own army. The, I apologize here, the Königlich Sächsische Armee. Would
Yeah.
you explain to listeners a little about Saxony, where it is located today and in the past, if that's any different?
Yeah, sure. Well, Saxony, as it stands today, the current German federal state,
Hmm.
Freistaat Sachsen, actually has almost the same borders as the kingdom, surprisingly.
Okay.
They did lose a little tiny bit at the southeastern corner that was on the wrong side of the Oder-Neisse line, but in exchange, they actually got a piece of Prussian Silesia.
Okay.
So the size now is not much different. The big territorial loss was 1815 due to being friends with Napoleon for too long. They lost about 50%
Did
of
they
their
really?
previous territory because
Okay.
Saxony used to be at one time one of the most powerful states of the Holy Roman Empire, but they really missed out on their opportunity because it got partitioned in 1485. I know this is going back an absurdly long way, between the two brothers, the two heirs to the Elector Duke at the time,
Okay.
and half of it ended up becoming all these small states in Thuringia, like your Saxe-Weimar Eisenachs and your Saxe-Altenburgs and so on. It's the same royal house, but the other branch. So the half that became the kingdom was actually the junior line originally.
Oh, okay.
Um, it's all to do with being on the side of the Holy Roman Emperor at the right time, you see.
Hmm.
But Saxony is well known for being the cradle of the Reformation. Back when Wittenberg was Saxon, they were the protectors of Martin Luther, and
Okay.
this got the country involved in a lot of very unpleasant religious wars. But it nevertheless was always very commercially strong and culturally strong. Less successful in war, but a big heavy hitter in those fields. At its peak, I would say, under Augustus the Strong. August der Starke, 1670 to 1733, who ironically converted the royal house back to Catholicism because he wanted to be king of Poland.
Oh,
And under him, it was the personal union, the Saxony Poland with a hyphen in between,
okay.
which was a major player in Central Eastern Europe, ally of Russia against the Swedes. They Under him, Dresden became this absolute Baroque jewel of a city that was admired all over Europe. But he spent phenomenal amounts of money on his extravagances, on making Dresden and Warsaw indeed very beautiful, on all the enormous outlay of becoming King of Poland in the first place, and on his legion of mistresses. He's supposed to have had several hundred illegitimate children.
Wow. Okay.
But obviously, it ended soon. He was after him. His son was also king of Poland for a while, but that was the end of it subsequently. And they did very badly against Frederick the Great.
Okay.
They ended up allied with Napoleon, as I say, which resulted in a very large number of Saxon soldiers dying in Russia, and then subsequently being defeated and losing half their territory. And after that, they decided to be allies of Austria against Prussia because they were very keen on the question of German unification, the Kleindeutsche Lösung and the Großdeutsche Lösung,
Hmm.
as to whether Austria would become part of it or not. Saxony obviously favoured that because Austria was their great ally and they wanted a counterpole to Prussia. and they ended up going to war to defend this idea in 1866, and they were most certainly Austria's most effective ally in that war, but it didn't save them. So they ended up soundly defeated and having to pay Prussia a large indemnity, but being considered Austria's closest ally, saved them because it meant they didn't get annexed. Because the Prussians wanted to be able to restore relations with Austria afterwards. So Saxony survived for this reason. And
Okay.
indeed, the Saxon army survived for this reason as well.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So my next question was going to be like, how does Saxony keep its own army in a now unified Germany? And this now in light of the with the Austrian War in 1866, like, wow, this is really surprising.
Um, they only just managed it. And Bismarck and the future Kaiser Wilhelm I were both in favour of fully incorporating all of the Saxon military directly into the Prussian army under Prussian leadership. But von Roon, von Moltke, and other senior Prussian generals argued very strongly against it. They contended that the Saxons would be much more effective and loyal if respected and allowed to operate under their own leadership.
Interesting.
And they were proven correct. The Saxons were very determined to prove them correct. And in 1867, they radically reformed the army under the leadership of the then War Minister, von Fabrice. I think I'm probably pronouncing that wrongly. I've never heard anyone say it out loud. But they reorganized the whole thing onto the Prussian regimental system.
Okay.
Previously, it was battalions and brigades. All the units were renumbered. Amusingly, this meant that Saxon Field Artillery Regiment 12 ended up being, on paper, the oldest unit in the German army because of tradition, because it inherited the entire tradition of the Saxon artillery arm. So its
Oh,
founding date is technically 16 something,
impressive. Okay. Yep.
earlier than any Prussian unit. But they managed this massive reorganization in startlingly short time. And then in 1870, they did exceptionally well to the point that Crown Prince Albert of Saxony, who'd been the field commander in 1866, of the entire Saxon army as it was then, was a single corps.
Okay.
He led this initially in 1870, but the Prussians effectively promoted him upwards. They made him a field army commander, and he ended up being in command over the siege of Paris.
Oh, okay.
And the Saxon corps did exceptionally well in the field. They were instrumental in the victory at Gravelotte-Saint-Privat. From the Saxon point of view, they rescued the Prussian Guard. This is obviously contentious, but that
Mhm.
is the Saxon view. But everyone agreed that they had done very well for themselves, and the Prussians accepted that it had been correct to allow them their head, and they lived off this reputation for decades afterwards.
Oh,
And it did go a very long way towards effectively bringing together these very disparate military traditions. I mean, this is not a very promising start to be like defeated and forcibly brought under your previous enemies' military conventions and made to operate alongside them. But this victory, it mended a lot of fences, and then the commemoration of this victory subsequently reinforced it. They were also, of course, doing commemorative events alongside the Austrians, which the Prussians were less happy about. Um,
okay.
and you see a lot of stuff in the Prussian press about how close they are to the Austrians and also to the Hanoverians, because Hanover, as I say, was annexed. And a
Mhm.
lot of the old Hanoverian military nobility did not wish to serve in the Prussian army, so they went and joined the Saxon service instead.
Oh,
Um, so there was a very large clique in the Saxon officer corps who were Hanoverian, particularly in the cadet corps. The Prussian press was very anxious about this. There's a lot of pointing this out that there's like these treacherous partisans of the Welf dynasty lurking in the Saxon cadet corps. And
Ah,
the old Saxon nobility didn't like it either because it affected their promotion prospects. You know, there's dozens and dozens of experienced officers coming in, and suddenly they're jockeying for the small number of senior positions within the Saxon army.
and the Saxons were able to retain their own staff school, correct?
Yes, they had their own general staff, but they attended the Prussian staff college. Only the Bavarians had their own staff college,
Oh,
but
okay.
the
Okay.
Saxons had their own cadet corps.
All right.
So they did all of their training up until the general staff level within the Saxon system.
Oh,
It really was its own distinct entity. There's a war ministry, there's a corps of officers, there's a recruiting pool, there's a budget, there are Saxon uniforms which are more distinct than those of any other contingent. So it's all supposed to follow the Prussian model, but the Prussian model is applied by Saxons and interpreted by Saxons. So it remains culturally distinct. I've got some of the training manuals on the shelf there, and they are similar, but there are a lot of funny little touches. I particularly like the illustrations all show like the Saxon uniform, except you see like the targets and the rifle range, and they're the ones that every contingent in Germany uses. But the amusing thing is that, of course, they've got the Prussian Brandenburg cuff on,
oh,
which no units in the Saxon army wear that, so it doesn't match them. But unfortunately, it does match the Prussians.
interesting.
And the
Interesting.
the military oath, which I included in the book, is quite a beautiful piece of political compromise because you see that they have to swear loyalty to the King of Saxony, of course, but then also to the Kaiser with a very specific set of wording.
Okay.
So they're loyal to the King of Saxony is their sovereign, but then they're also loyal to the Kaiser as supreme warlord at the same time.
Okay, okay. Bit of a distinction there. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can tell that like a team of lawyers and diplomats has worked on this and like wrestled out this as a set of compromises.
Fascinating. So, Andrew, with the Saxon army is basically its own entity within like the under the Prussians. So like you said, its own cadet corps, its own budget, and everything. It seems that they also had their own maintained their own archives and everything. And
Yes.
because are these some of the sources like that you used in writing fighting the Kaiser's war? Like for anybody who's studied history a lot, particularly German history, you will inevitably come across that during World War II, at the end of World War II, many of the Prussian archives were bombed by in Allied bombing raids,
Yes.
and they were destroyed. So a lot of like World War I information has been lost, very
Hmm.
unfortunately. But this is not the case with the Saxons, correct? Or is it a little?
Yeah, it's complicated. People
Okay.
used to believe before the Berlin Wall came down that the Saxon archives were presumed lost, and lots of people think that it was destroyed in the firebombing of Dresden. But
Okay.
in fact, they had stored all the material in railway tunnels, and it did survive the war. But what it did not survive was pillaging by the Red Army.
Right.
So basically, it all went off to Moscow, and then some of it came back piecemeal subsequently, and they're still finding some of it now.
Really?
There is a site, German documents in Russian archives, where some of it has turned up, as well as various Prussian bits and pieces. But basically, we don't have any of the individual personnel files, the muster rolls. The really that core stuff. I think that it's believed that was centralized in Potsdam and went up with the Prussian archives.
Okay.
Most of the war diaries for the infantry regiments are missing, which is extremely annoying.
Yeah.
There's basically very thin coverage of almost all infantry regiments except for IR 134 for some reason. But there's a lot for the artillery, which is great. I was able to find several documents with my great grandfather's signature on when I went there.
Really?
Just small stuff. I mean, he was
Mhm.
just a gift writer, but for example, a document I found where they're all signing off in the battery for the Christmas bonus, all the Unteroffizier and corporals,
Mhm.
the Unteroffizier and gift writer, sorry. And yeah, he's got his signature on there, and that was quite delightful to find. And stuff that we've actually made use of in the books, particularly we're talking about the first one. It's all core level material we used.
Okay.
There is some excellent core level material. After we'd written the first book, and for the first book, Jürgen did all the archival research. For the second, I had been there in the meantime, and I dug into the core orders of the day for 27 Reserve Corps. And they are an absolute gold mine. There's amazing stuff. It's all the announcements promulgated down to corps level from Fourth Army, and
Okay.
also all of their own stuff. So you find out a lot about what's going on behind the front line. Some of it extraordinarily petty, some of it fantastically useful, like the layouts of the field railway,
Okay.
when particular like operations take place. I found out when the church steeple in Zonnebecker was blown up, which is really useful for photo
Mhm.
identification, for
Oh,
instance.
right.
Um, there, you get all the reports of all the sentences passed by the court-martial system for the Fourth Army, but with the names are not anonymized. That's a regular thing in the core orders of the day. Um, but some of the really good stuff that Jürgen found that's in the first book, there's a delightful piece from the what was it? The Geheime Feldpolizei of Fourth Army that's
Secret
been
field
passed
police.
down to either 19 Army Corps or 27 Reserve Corps, one or the other, where they go into great detail about the various kinds of criminality that they're attempting to suppress behind the lines. Um, some of it involving civilians, some of it involving soldiers, some of it involving both.
Really interesting. Like
Yes.
anything of note, like we all know. I mean, soldiers are human, and like, they're going to cause trouble as well. So,
Well, yeah.
what sort of trouble were they up to?
Well, it's mostly theft.
Okay.
It's primarily theft. There's one thing that I found very striking that's in that report, which is written in very pompous bureaucratic German, incidentally, which I tried to characterize properly in the translation.
Okay.
Um, he describes how this farmer caught these soldiers attempting to steal. I think it was chickens. It's often chickens, but he locked them in his barn and then went and summoned the Ortskommandantur. So it shows you the way that the system works. That
Oh,
um, obviously in 1914 there was a great deal of lassitude and there was a lot of wild requisition, but they tried to suppress that quite early on. And this is a couple of years later, and there's an understanding that they can't simply do anything they want to do, and there's the farmer knows this full well. So like he locks them up and he goes and summons the proper authorities, and they are in the shtuck for it.
so this is actually really interesting that, the German authorities wouldn't. I assume this farmer was French or Belgian, and that
Yeah, Belgian, I believe. Yeah.
and that, like, that this Belgian farmer knew that he could go complain to the German authorities, like, hey, your guys
Yes.
are stealing my chickens, man. You guys need to do
Yeah. Yeah.
something about this.
Well, yeah, precisely. Yes, precisely so. Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, when it's the army doing it officially, when they've got like a requisition order for it,
Hmm.
then there's nothing you can do about it. But when it's like some dodgy corporal and his mate off on their own without the support of the army, then that's quite a different matter.
Right. I was
Um,
wondering if it might be a gentleman named Kaczynski and Bomer, but they were stealing geese, actually, so
oh,
not chickens.
well, he doesn't have any names in that report, and there aren't any names in the daily returns of the reports at Fourth Army level of the sentences passed, it doesn't even identify units. It says it identifies their rank
Wow.
and the offences and the sentence passed. And these sentences in 1914, 15, which was when I was looking at, are really inadequate.
Oh,
And you think, oh, he's going AWOL, and oh, they've punished him with like some period of detention or whatever, or for the worst stuff, like oh, he's going to be ejected, he's going to be dishonorably discharged from the army and go to prison for a few years. I'm sure that's a great deterrent from escaping from the possibility of being killed.
right,
Um,
right,
the
right.
most egregious, the most startling thing, and I'll have to describe this delicately so as not to shock anyone, but there's an individual who was convicted of interfering with a female horse in an intimate way.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
yeah, Bestialitat mit einer Stute. And yes, I can't remember what the sentence they gave him was, but I think it was a few months of. It wasn't anything very drastic, but I think I think being known as someone who does that within his unit would probably be sufficient punishment.
Oh my God.
Mm.
Wow.
But I digress. We've got lots of other original material that we dig up for color, like little orders and things. There's one in the 1917 chapter which really tells you a lot, where it's talking about, shortages of coffins and how are authorizing burial in the Zeltplane. The wonderful German tent sheet, which, unlike the World War II one, is like large and square, and there is actually sufficient space in it that you can wrap a whole body up in it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, wow. All right. So, I mean, all of this we're leading up to, I guess like our the next question here is what was the Saxon experience of the Great War? And in your book, how do you convey that experience?
Well, the idea when they were mobilized was that now that there were two active Saxon corps. This is the rate of expansion since 1871.
Okay.
There are two regular corps, and
Okay.
immediately upon mobilization, there's a reserve corps as well, and a further ersatz division and a cavalry division. And the concept is the three corps will be united together under a Saxon army command, and the Royal Saxon Army will be a full German field army. It's Third Army.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
that is how they will wage war. This is the plan. But this breaks down quite rapidly during the Battle of the Marne.
All right.
And in addition, the commander, the Saxon War Minister Freiherr von Hausen, he is taken extremely ill, and he ends up being replaced with a Prussian, which
Okay.
is somewhat of a blow to pride. But
Sure.
the three Saxon corps end up separated and sent to completely different fronts, and they're never united again. So the concept of the Saxon army as a single body in the field ends within about a month. But it does continue to be the case that the corps are united up until like the end of 1916. They're like broken up for good, and then the corps and divisions are separated. But still, right up until the end of the war, the great majority of Saxon soldiers are, as in personnel of the Royal Saxon Army. You don't need to be even a subject of the Saxon crown to serve in the Saxon Army, but that's by
Okay.
the by. Um, the great majority of Saxon servicemen are still serving under a complete Saxon command chain up to divisional level. So they're going to be operating in their own sector, and there'll be like other units attached and present, but they're going to be around their own a lot of the time. So their experience of the war is being surrounded by their own specific army a lot of the time. They do interact with the other German contingents a great deal, but the
Mhm.
core is that they are in there and being managed by it. It's not quite. It's very different to the Prussian army in a lot of ways. In fact, just because of the size. The officer corps is small enough that seemingly, if you look at the memoirs of someone like our friend General Mayor Carden, who is a brigade commander, you get the
Okay.
impression that he knows everybody at his rank level within the Saxon army, and of course he knows the king
Hmm.
personally, as everyone at that rank did. And
Okay.
the king, he's got a lot less to do than the Kaiser does. If you're in the Prussian army, your unit may be visited by the Kaiser like once, maybe twice during the war. Be
Hmm.
really lucky.
Right.
But in the Saxon army, you're going to see the king more often than that.
Okay.
And he did try very hard to create personal relationships with the units, and he was a lot more down to earth than the Kaiser, famously so. He had this habit of speaking in Saxon dialect, even to other monarchs, which caused great amusement outside of Saxony, but got him greatly loved there because the Saxon dialect was and is mocked by other Germans.
Okay.
So they're very conscious of their identity, and it is constantly reinforced. And of course, they look different. This changes somewhat when the Feldbluser comes in and everyone starts to be homogenized, but they're very conscious of who they are, and every other German contingent that meets them is conscious of who they are. And back then, regional identity is a great deal stronger. People don't travel so much, so particularly if you get rural people, they're going to have very strong regional accents. And they meet people from the other end of Germany, they're going to sound very, very different to each other.
Interesting.
And they're going to rib each other over their regional stereotypes and the accents and so on, particularly if there's any tension already.
Hmm.
Um, I think we described the problems with the interoperation of the Württemberg and Saxon armies, because Württemberg being the smallest German army, they ended up on doing three successive projects of mixed divisions with Saxony,
Okay.
because their war ministry preferred doing that than being like doing something mixed with the Prussians and just being
Mhm.
absorbed. But particularly in the 27 Reserve Corps, which was like the least successful, because this
Okay.
is one of the new ones formed in 1914 with large numbers of volunteers and airsats reservists, and with like 8 weeks training.
Hmm.
They thrown into the first Battle of Ypres, where they get absolutely minced. There was The relationship between the contingents was absolutely terrible. It got really bad because like the army commander was a Württemberger, the corps commander was a Saxon. Both contingents could blame the other for all the operational failures, and they did. And it got to the point of mocking each other's accents. And there's an anecdote I repeat in the book where they're talking about how when you're coming to the field kitchen in the dark, you'd be tested in your accent before they'd let you eat.
Really?
Yeah, so they wouldn't want any Württembergers coming in and sneaking some of their soup. They'd prefer to throw it on the ground than
Oh
let them have it.
gosh. Yep. I can understand that. I can understand
It's
that.
not very good. It doesn't. So that was. It's not very good within a division when this is regiments within the same division feeling that way about each other.
Right. Right.
So
Understood.
all these mixed divisions became one thing or the other solely by the end of 1916.
I have a
Um,
couple of questions that I just thought up um while I
yeah,
was
sure,
listening.
sure.
So overall, and this is of course like the impression that I've had from reading, the the Prussians are seen as these like kind of stiff, overbearing, elitist Junkers, right? Like in kind of like looking down
Mm.
on the other Germans. Is that accurate or
It's a stereotype,
okay?
um, and the Prussian officer corps does not consciously project this image to an extent. The Saxon officer corps sees itself differently, as quite proud of being like more cultured,
Okay. Okay.
um, more and more sociable, and just generally more like human. But um, these are quite subtle differences, really. And when you're talking about the Prussian army, you have to remember that this is like the great majority of Germany.
Hmm.
Um, the state of Prussia is bigger than all the others put together, and its army is larger than all the other armies put together. And it includes men from like the French border to like the Russian border.
Hmm. Hmm. Wide range of
Though
military.
it is a single officer corps, of course, which provides officers for that whole army. There is no sort of regional differentiation that you might be assigned to, like, and Prussian officers like dreaded this being assigned to like some really unfashionable garrison out on the eastern border
Yes.
where the social life was very poor and the weather was bad and but these things happened, and it wasn't necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily go where you were actually from.
Yes.
So they try to impose a single culture across the whole thing, but it's spread quite thinly. Like the old Prussian ethos, the old Prussian culture spread very thinly across this vast swathe. Whereas like Saxony, Württemberg, and Bavaria all have much stronger consistent identities because they are their own small self-contained things.
Oh, interesting.
Mm.
I remember Dennis Showalter's book Tannenberg. He spoke of officers really dreading being uh, stationed out east, and
Yeah.
they called a lot of the towns out there Dreknesta, which is
Yes.
for English listeners. I think we can translate that to shitholes. So
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's precisely how I would translate it.
yeah.
But yeah, in peacetime, what officers wanted was like a lively social life
Hmm.
and a chance to meet lots of eligible young ladies with money because the thing about being an officer is it's extremely expensive.
Oh,
And up until you reach the rank of Major, you turn it's called turning the Major's Ecke, the Major's Corner. At that point, you
interesting.
can actually live off the wages, but up until then, it's costing you money. So, but it brings you social status. So either you need to have family wealth, or you need to marry it
Oh,
using the social status that you have. And this is true in all the German armies. So if you haven't married already and you're being assigned to a garrison where the social life is practically non-existent, you're consigning yourself to potentially to financial ruin because you have to keep up a certain lifestyle as well,
right, right. And you're not going to find
which
a girl
involves
out
a
in
lot
like
of drinking and
right.
yeah, and there's plenty of opportunities to get into bad habits with gambling as well. So yeah, you can see there's big pitfalls here in peacetime.
Yes, and it's going to be hard to find a girl out in like Staluponen or something like that out in,
Yes.
way out east. Yeah, understood. My other question, which is also off topic a bit, is the label of ersatz. Really quick, and I don't mean to derail the conversation here, but the label of like an Ersatzregiment, like what did that mean?
Oh, okay. Well, an ersatz infantry regiment is a peculiar creature.
Okay.
Saxony had an entire 19th ersatz division, and what that meant was that when it was formed in summer 1914, it was a set of provisional incomplete units.
Okay.
So you would have things. So rather than having infantry regiments, it has a bunch of Brigade Ersatzbataillonen. And a Brigade Ersatzbataillon is basically two two Ersatzbataillonen, four regiments of the same brigade, say IR 102 and IR 103. The active regiments are brigaded together.
Okay.
So each of their Ersatzbataillonen provides two companies, and together these four companies form this field unit.
Okay.
And it's not fully equipped like a proper field battalion. It probably doesn't have field kitchens.
Oh,
The brigade that it belongs to will be lucky if it has any machine guns at all. There is artillery, but similarly, it's like individual. sections of 2 guns provided in a similar way from the Ersatzabteilungen of the artillery regiments.
Okay.
So, and they're all wearing the uniforms of their original units as well. So when the 19th Ersatz Division arrives in the field in the Vosges, you
Hmm.
can see pretty much every unit of the Saxon army represented in there.
Oh,
So all 17 infantry regiments, they all have like their numbers and their shoulder straps are in there somewhere. So
okay.
once the idea with this is we're going to get all the trained manpower to the front as quickly as possible, to try to win the war quickly, and then when they settle down for the long term, they try to regularize this. So this means in spring 1915, they grouped these Ersatzbataillon these brigade Ersatzbataillon together, and they form Ersatz infantry regiments.
Okay.
So, and then that is fully equipped like a regular infantry regiment, but it has that title because of how it was formed. And then it gains a new number, and they all get unified. But you get weird anomalies like Ersatz Infantry Regiment 23 is one of my favorites because it's formed from the Brigade Ersatzbataillon that have the Saxon Grenadier regiments and the Schutzen regiment in them. The Grenadier regiments have Litzen. The Schutzen regiment is basically they're dressed like Jaeger, complete with the Charcot and everything.
Oh, really?
And they
Okay.
maintain this inside Ersatz Infantry Regiment 23, but they just organize it on the basis of companies to be tidy. So you have entire companies in that regiment that have got the full grenadier uniform, and there are companies that have the Schutzen uniform, complete with the Charcot
Wow. Wow. I
and
see.
and a shoulder strap with a hunting horn and 23 under it. It is the
Oh,
most bizarre, anomalous thing ever. But yeah, that's what an ersatz infantry regiment was.
oh,
And
interesting.
there are ersatz field artillery regiments as well with the same kind of origins. But once it's a full regimental unit, then it's standardized. It's the same as a regular one, but it just has inherited that title.
Oh, interesting. And zooming out, as you said, Saxons, largely throughout the war managed to serve with other Saxons and everything, and the
Yes.
Saxon king visited them often, and the identity was really reinforced. So this obviously must have affected Saxon morale in that it helped probably keep it pretty high throughout the war, or no?
Well, it certainly didn't. It certainly didn't remain that way.
Okay.
They had some. They have an experience which is somewhat similar to the British one, because if you look at Saxony on the map, you'll see that they are surrounded by other German states and by Austria-Hungary. The war is a long way away from home.
Okay.
They can't even be reached by aerial bombing in World War One.
Hmm.
So they have no realistic fear of the French or the Russians arriving in their hometown,
Right.
like someone from East Prussia or from Alsace-Lorraine has, or from
Hmm.
Baden. Um, they have this semi-detached attitude, and it is a bit like the British. They know that their home is not going to be touched, so this means that it's less personal for them.
Okay.
And I think this affects the willingness to truce and the willingness to engage in live and let live. But also it means that when the war goes on longer and the shortages really kick in and the losses really kick in, I think their morale breaks sooner, partly for this reason.
Okay.
Also, they have the most urbanized population in Germany. It's the most densely populated state apart from like the free Hanseatic towns. And Saxony is known pre-war for its political radicalism. The working classes are very much oriented towards socialism and potentially towards like objections to the war from that direction. Although that's neutralized in 1914 when the major parties come on board. But in the longer term, it frays along those lines. And the British in their intelligence assessments. You know this book, 251 Divisions of the German Army, blah, blah,
Yes.
blah,
Hmm.
which is an American publication, but it's based on intelligence collected primarily by the British, but by the French and everyone else.
Okay.
And it does specifically state that they had this belief that in the latter half of 1918, all the Saxon divisions are performing less well than before, and they degrade all of them by one. They have a 4-point scale,
Hmm.
and they downgrade all the Saxon divisions by one class across the board.
Okay.
They believe that this is the case. That once it's clear that the war is not winnable, the willingness to continue fighting it is greatly reduced, further than even with other Germans.
Interesting. I want to come back to this in just a couple of questions here, but I wanted to get back to the book, Fighting the Kaiser's War.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
how did you how is the book set up? Like like the chapters and everything. Is it like just a
Oh, sure.
chronological tale of the Saxons in Flanders? It looked a little different to me.
Well, it's semi-chronological. First of all, I had to summarize the entire war from the Saxon point of view,
Hmm.
all the theatres, all the divisions, so you can then put the subsequent material into context. Because they were active on every European front. Um, Very small commitment in Italy and relatively small one in Macedonia, but these are places where there aren't that many Germans overall anyway, but everywhere else you see whole divisions. Um, and then once I past that, I go year by year, and for
Hmm.
each year I summarize the major developments and the units that are present and their movements. And then once I've done that, I tackle them one after another, each division or corps that was present in Flanders in that year. Oh, and our definition of Flanders is quite an arbitrary one, by the way. We were going to do the whole Western Front. We realised that we couldn't do justice to that in 256 pages, so
Hmm.
we had to take a section thereof, and we decided based on the quality of material that was available to us and the maximum interest for British readers,
Gotcha.
that we would do the northernmost section.
Okay.
And then we made the cut-off point quite arbitrarily at the La Bassée Canal based on where units were actually present. So you do have corps down there by Neuve Chapelle that do extend. No, it's certainly beyond anyone's realistic definition of Flanders, but we've
Sure.
included it because it makes sense in terms
Hmm.
of the units. Anyway, we do each year that way, and then after we've gone year by year, we then have a whole chapter on the independent units, of which there are a very large number, and this is extremely difficult to research.
Really?
But I've been digging up this material for years and years. Basically, Jürgen and I are both primarily photo collectors, and we
Okay.
also collect information. So I sort everything I've been finding for the past, gosh, nearly 2 decades now. I organize it electronically by arm of service and then by individual unit.
Okay.
So I'm gradually accumulating files on even very, very small and obscure Saxon units, which I may find occasionally a mention of them in some other source, or maybe it's just postcards. You get in some information from field postcards and see, oh, I know, so this unit was there at this point in 1916, at least on this front. That tells me something. So I summarise the known history of all the smaller units as well as I can, which is quite interesting. The heavy artillery. There was a lot of it. The Saxons did possess a great deal of heavy artillery. It is a very wealthy German state with a lot of high industrial production. I mean, they don't make their own guns, but they can afford them.
Right. Right.
Um, and they actually possess something which none of the other German armies, not even the Prussians, have this. They have a 38 centimeter battery.
Whoa. Okay.
All the other ones are operated by the Navy, but the Saxons have got one because it was from the scrapped battleship, the incomplete, discontinued battleship SMS Saxon. They were
Oh,
given one of the 38 centimeter guns off that.
oh, interesting.
So they have a lot of these heavy artillery units, and I followed them in detail for years, trying to assemble what we can of their movements. So we cover them, the independent field artillery, the pioneer, the mining units. There were a whole load of Saxon mining companies, a lot of them operating around Neuve-Chapelle
Okay.
and points north thereof, and the Landsturm, of course, which is a particular love of ours. Most photo collectors love the Landsturm. They are so intriguingly diverse in their appearance and what they ordered and what they got up to.
Oh, okay.
And then once we've done that, the final substantive chapter is the personal accounts. And really, that's the heart of the book. That's what we presented to the publisher originally as our proposal.
Gosh.
That's what the hook is.
And
But
yeah.
the chronological chapters basically allow you to understand the personal accounts.
Okay, because I I was going to bring up the that second to last section is the Saxon lives and deaths in Flanders. And I mean,
Yeah.
this is a very moving part of your book. And how did you come across the stories in this section? The tragedy of Hans Bruckner. Um, my gosh, man, like the that poor kid, and his poor father, afterwards.
Well,
Yeah.
it's thanks to his father that we have that, because the
Yeah.
source in that case is not his own diary or letters, but it's his father's, because his
Hmm.
father copied the letters into his own diary, and it's the father's diary that Jürgen subsequently found, because Jürgen's been collecting this material since before the Iron Curtain came down, and
Okay.
before any Western collectors started to investigate what might exist over there.
Hmm.
So he was going to house clearances and flea markets and little antique shops for this material before there was much interest in it. And he's got a really good eye for it. And he's gradually accumulated this stuff. Some of it comes from bundles of old letters. He's got like a shoebox full of like the hundreds of letters for Kurt Penter, who's one of our featured diarists. He only just, I think, last year finished the job of transcribing all of Penter's letters up to the end of 1918, and I've not read all of it myself yet. Though I should, because Penter is particularly interesting. He was a stormtroop leader, a very active trench raider. He's a extremely impressive individual.
Oh man.
And that came from the family selling off his legacy, which was very sad. But
Yeah.
his uniform, his medals, all his photos, it all went. But Jürgen managed to get the letters and the one photo that we feature there, of him in the trench in Alshi. Some of it is original diaries. Some of it is from small publications like local rolls of honor,
Hmm. Hmm.
or veterans newspapers. We lean on veterans newspapers very heavily in the second book. And General Mayor-Carden's an interesting one because he did actually publish his memoirs based on his diary. But what Jürgen has is the typescript, where he got his original diary and he typed it up in like the 1920s or whatever. And there's a lot of hand annotations and so on. And
Oh.
then the published one was abridged and sanitized, mainly for potential libel implications.
Oh.
Um,
Okay.
there's family stuff that he doesn't want to put into print, largely about his younger sons trying to get transferred to the cavalry and getting into trouble for that. but there's also criticisms of specific individual officers who were still alive when he published his memoirs. So
Gotcha.
that all goes because Carden ended up falling out with the Falkenhayn Army Command very badly over Verdun and what happened to his brigade at Verdun, and that ended up in him not having another field command, and he was really, really bitter about that, understandably. So there's some pretty fruity stuff about Falkenhayn in the manuscript,
Oh.
which is obviously not in the part that we translated. The part we translated is obviously from when he was in the relevant area.
Of course.
Um,
Of course. Oh,
but
amazing.
we're still turning up this stuff. Just this year, we got the notion from inspired by something that Rob Schaefer had done with the Westphalian Seventh Corps, their role in the Christmas truce, where they fraternized with the Indians, as he established. I said, well, Jürgen, we really should try and look into Saxon local newspapers from that same very, very small period of a few days between Christmas 1914 and early New Year, when it started to become dangerous, potentially troublesome to start to talk about this stuff in print after the
Okay.
British news stories had come out and it became like somewhat politically troublesome. But
Gotcha.
and we did indeed. We found some accounts that have never been seen before, and I'm going to do something with that. But more of that later on. But yeah, essentially, we hunt up primary source material that has never appeared in English and often never appeared in print at all.
Wow.
Certainly, in all cases, not in almost all cases, never appeared in print since World War II. Like Carden was in print in the 30s briefly, small edition, never since, and never heard of after that.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Um, m- I guess m moving back to where we where we were headed before I veered off to ask about the book.
Yeah, yeah.
In my experience with World War One memoirs and histories, I've come away with the impression that Saxon Germans were more easygoing regarding their enemies and on the other side of the wire. And you just mentioned this, so there seems to be some truth to it. And since we are recording here, it's December 3rd, 2025, and Christmas
Mhm.
2025 is a few 3 weeks away. Um, so Saxon connections to the Christmas truce and to the live and let live system.
Well, most certainly so.
Okay.
The Saxon stereotype, which it doesn't exist so much now because back then Saxony was economically the most prosperous part of Germany, and now it isn't. But
Right.
is the gemütliche Saxon, the comfortable, cozy Saxons. And this is something in the army's self-image as well. They pride themselves on being able to create a comfortable, civilized existence in very unpromising conditions.
Okay.
Um, the fraternization thing, it's it's largely specific to the British, but they do also pride themselves. You see this in the history, in regimental histories. They pride themselves on things like being more liked by the civilian population than the other contingents.
Okay.
But if you look at it, say, from the French point of view, you find they don't have any special regard for the Saxons, and they're more likely to have like warmer feelings for the Catholic South Germans. So it is in large part a special relationship between the British and the Saxons, and it's certainly heavily connected with the Christmas truce, but there's evidence of it before that. For example, there was a ceasefire an unofficial temporary ceasefire for the retrieval of the wounded
Hmm.
near Premesque between IR 179 and the Leinsters, which I found out about from I think it was a regimental newsletter of the Leinsters,
Okay.
where they had some original accounts from back then. Um, because when you actually look at the Christmas truce accounts, you see a lot of the British witnesses, they say things like, there's one I quoted. He says that something like, "Oh, when we saw they were Saxons, we knew it was all right."
Right. Right. Little lines
They
like that.
they yeah, they have a belief that the Saxons are more agreeable, certainly more agreeable than the Prussians, but um, it's partly because I think the British newspaper propaganda is absolutely monomaniacal in directing hatred towards the Prussians. That even when they're talking about um, the burning of Dinant and the shooting of civilians there, that was Saxon 23rd Infantry Division. Quite prepared to admit that.
Okay.
Um, you won't see the word Saxon used in any British coverage of that. You
Really?
will in French coverage, but not in British. So there is no primed hatred against the Saxons, and I think there was a propaganda strategy from the British side to attempt to split away the other states from Prussia. This was something that they had in mind, that they hoped to achieve. But the effect is that the Tommy on the ground thinks that non-Prussians are okay, essentially. And what's particularly intriguing is you see personal accounts from parts of the truce front where it wasn't the Saxons, say south of the Saxon 19th Army Corps, it was Westphalian 7th Army Corps.
Okay.
And you see British accounts from down there where they say that the men opposite them were Saxons and told them they were Saxons, which was not the case, of course.
Right. Right.
Um, so it's interesting that they chose to pretend to be Saxons, isn't it?
Wow,
It's
interesting.
suggestive. It is suggestive, but anyway,
Yeah.
there is certainly the Saxon participation was very great. So 19th Army Corps extends from the River Douve in the north all the way down to Bois Grenier in the south.
Okay.
So it takes in the whole frontage around between Armentières and Lille, Plugsteert Wood, uh, Frelinghie and Vesmacar. That's all Saxon. Though at the very northern end, north of Plugsteert Wood, there's a bunch of non-Saxon units attached to them. So there's a very interesting fraternization area immediately north of Plugsteert Wood, where there's a whole bunch of different units involved. There's a Hanoverian Jaeger battalion. Well, from Hanover, obviously it's Prussian, but they are from Hanover and they
Mhm.
actually have the Hanoverian uniform traditions. They have the Gibraltar Cuff title, but no British account mentions this. And I still don't understand because there are really detailed accounts of fraternization between the Seaforth Highlanders and that unit, but it's not mentioned. And I'm guessed because they had their greatcoats on and it's on their tunic sleeve. But
Right.
still, no one seemed to have thought to mention, oh, we're Hanoverian.
Right.
You'd think they would mention that when fraternizing with the British, but somehow they didn't.
Yeah,
And
or
there are
that
Bavarians there as well,
yeah.
and Prussian machine gunners from a different Jaeger battalion. But yeah, the Saxons very much advertise their identity. They're often reported as saying, "Oh, we are Saxons, you are Anglo-Saxons. We friends, we know shoot." So on. That seems to have been a popular line taken during fraternization. And as you'll see from General Major Carden's account, which I think is enormously historically interesting, and it frustrates me no end that we put that into print in 2015. And I thought, oh, this is a major discovery. Everyone will look at this and say, oh, you found the highest ranking German eyewitness to the Christmas truce yet. This is
Mhm.
like a really, really major insight here. It seems to have sunk like a stone, but he's a brigade commander. Both of his regiments fraternize. His brigade is they because they were brought in late during the fighting in October as reinforcements.
Mhm.
They're detached. They're in two different places. So
Okay.
one of his regiments is at Vesmacar, which is where the longest fraternization went on, well into January.
Oh, okay.
And his other that's IR 107, and his other one IR 106 is up at Plugsteert Wood. So they're both in fraternization hotspots. And he writes about the whole thing really warmly and approvingly. He doesn't see anything wrong with it. Although he's describing it in legitimate terms as, oh, a truce for a mutual ceasefire for the burial of the dead and so on. So he doesn't go into like the naughtiest aspects of it.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Um,
Fascinating.
but he doesn't see anything wrong with it. And even more fascinatingly, um, when IR 106, also up at Plugsteert Wood, yes, oh, sorry, his other regiment, 106, they put in an official truce proposal, which is preserved in a British war diary. They proposed an official New Year truce, and it's signed by their regimental commander. This was handed over. It's a formal official thing, and it says, like, in the name of the Zuständiges Generalkommando, which means the Generalkommando is the core staff. So he's
Hmm.
saying that this is an official truce proposal endorsed by the staff of Saxon 19th Army Corps. I'm to
Oh,
say we're having an official New Year ceasefire. But the British couldn't agree the terms in time, so that didn't end up happening. But you
okay.
see, this has clearly been passed up the command chain in a relatively acceptable way. It's saying, "Oh
Hmm.
no, we're not like outright fraternizing or anything, but we want to have a ceasefire with the British for the burial of the dead, all above board."
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
corps commander signs off on that,
Wow.
which is interesting.
Very,
Um,
very.
but there are anecdotal accounts of like regimental commanders coming to the front line and finding things going on and not seeing the funny side, but some certainly did. Like I think in IR 139, it's that their commander came down to the front line and they were desperately trying to make it appear normal, and the British were in on it and trying to make it appear normal too. But then he found out and he burst out laughing.
Oh, wow.
So, but I think the thing that really, oh, and you should remember, not all of the units in 19th Army Corps fraternized. There were spots where there was still bad temper and aggression. So it's not universal. It's not all the Saxon units there, but most of them.
Right.
But I think the really significant turning point, which you can see in Carden's diary, is when the British newspaper coverage comes out. And you can see his reaction in the diary after he's seen the newspaper coverage, where the British press are describing how the Saxons were so tired of the war and they hate the Prussians and they want it over. And you can see the obvious propaganda strategy. And he's
Right.
clearly deeply professionally embarrassed, and he absolutely blows his top over it. And he says, "Oh, if there's to be an official inquiry into this, I fully endorse it," and so on. And he says, "Oh, we want none of their sympathy," talking about the British.
Hmm. Hmm.
We're glad of their enmity and so on, and he gets really quite irate. So I think he feels that their goodwill was abused there.
Wow.
But but yeah, so this obviously has a very big effect because, as I say, the British press does emphasise the involvement in the Saxons, and pretty much the whole British army hears about it, it seems. But there's a more lasting effect than that because this whole front, 19th Army Corps, stays there until they go to the Somme at the end of July 1916.
Okay.
And as you know, it's well known, certainly through 1915, as a largely quiet front.
Hmm.
So the British have their tourist line for visiting dignitaries at Plugsteat Wood, and the Germans have their tourist line for journalists and politicians and foreign military attaches, and any visitor you want not to be killed is at Frillingian Brewery, which is a little further south. So it's reckoned to be the safest spot on the Western Front to show people. And I think I'm strongly convinced, though I don't have any documentary evidence to support this, that 19th Army Corps settled on a deliberate policy here of trying to maintain their own front in a quiet state in order to conserve ammunition and men and materiel,
Hmm.
which they were then able to use to provide a source of reinforcements to other parts of the front. So during 1915, they're lent a Prussian Landwehr brigade
Okay.
of Hanoverian and Brunswick origin, and they put those two regiments into their front. And so they permanently have two of their regular active regiments out, and this is an army level reserve, and they can send troops elsewhere as reinforcements. So 19th Army Corps troops fight in all the major battles that Sixth Army is involved in 1915. They're at Neuve Chapelle,
Okay.
they're at Albers Ridge,
Okay.
they're at the Hohenzollern Redoubt during the Battle of Loos. They're at Notre Dame de Lorette as well.
All right.
Um, So they don't see much fighting on their own front, but they see a lot of fighting on other fronts, and then come back home to their quiet front.
Oh,
And of course, the British use this front to introduce a lot of their units to the Western Front. So vast numbers of Tommies get their first experience of the Western Front, say at Plugsteat Wood,
okay.
opposite the Saxons. So that those are the first Germans that they encounter, and this reinforces the impression of the Saxons and the character of the Saxons.
Wow.
I think this is hugely influential, and this is obviously it starts with the Christmas truce, but it carries on, and I think it would have carried on longer, but the British deliberately put an end to it. I mean, there had been like flashpoints previously because there were mining areas. Like
Hmm.
there's mining going on at Le Touquet, just north of Frelingien, on the
Okay.
other side of the river, where there are how where the lines are very close together in houses, and there's mining up at the bird cage at Plugsteat Wood, or the Entenschnabel in German parlance.
Okay.
Um, so those have always have mining. Of course, you can't have complete peace in an area where that's going on, but most of it's relatively quiet. But in 1916, the British deliberately overturn it. So January 1916, there's a very major raid by Royal Irish Rifles against IR 181, who are at in the Le Touquet sector, and they suffer quite badly. And after that, there are lots of tit for tat minor operations like that. The whole thing hots up significantly. The rate of ammunition expenditure goes up. There's a lot more sniping and general bad temperedness, but it's never as hot as many other parts of the Western Front. But it's no longer it no longer has the character that you see in the 1915 chapter of our book. I think it's really summed up by those trench photos from IR 139 we have in there. There's an album that Jürgen got hold of. All those beautiful, beautiful, clean trenches, just perfect for inspection, not so much as like a cigarette end on the duckboards. And there's that extraordinary photo of those nursing sisters from Lille come down to visit the front line, which of course is totally against military convention, all military convention and social convention as well. It's really, really not on, but clearly this is an officer's photo album, so I reckon everyone up at least as far as the company commander is in on it.
Right. Right.
But that's possible there, and that really is genuinely the front line. And I don't think that would have happened in 1916.
No. No. Wow. Wow. This is, oh my God, so fascinating. Such a fascinating conversation, and like in learning so much more nuance about
It
German
took me
army.
such a long time to piece this together because like you get all these little references from the British side, but
Yeah.
it
Wow.
only starts to make sense once you compare. You've got all the German regimental histories lined up with the British war diaries and start to go through it systematically. And you find little hints of the attempts at fraternization between British and Saxons throughout the war. There was uh there's very unofficial trucing at St. Elwar in late 1915, which we refer to, which is in the memoir of a British officer called Hitchcock in the Second Leinsters. He uses it. He goes over and talks to this Saxon NCO to gain information, and he makes a pig's ear of it because the chap's shoulder straps are muddy, and he has trouble reading the seven because it's the German use, of the upside down two as a seven.
Hmm. Hmm.
So he ends up thinking that it's like the 129th Saxons or something, which doesn't exist. It's IR 178, but he uses a bit of alcohol to aid this deliberate seeking of information, and then he he's quite happy to do this, but then later on, when he's at Vimy Ridge in later in 1916, and he's got a different Saxon unit trying to approach his men for fraternization, he gives the order to fire on them when they get close, and he doesn't seem his conscience seems quite untroubled by this.
Wow.
And we've seen evidence of it at La Bassée in I think that was in 1916. I think some British officer got in trouble for that, if I remember rightly. I've seen one as late as 1918, which was on a very small scale. It was in one of the regimental histories, I think RIL 101, and it's like a trench raid that's gone wrong, and there's some men lying wounded in an unfortunate place, and they managed to establish communications, and the fact that they're Saxons does help, and
Okay.
wounded men are retrieved. But one would need to look systematically at how much this kind of thing happened with other German contingents to be able to see how meaningful the difference is. But there was definitely something there. There was a reputation that was known to the British, and the Saxons knew they had this reputation and were prepared to use it. Yeah, this special relationship is something that greatly fascinates me. I did originally want to call the book Tommy's Favorite Germans, but the publisher really didn't like that. They said, "Oh, no, no, we have to have the Kaiser in the title, and can we call it the Kaiser's Fiercest?" And I said, "Look, look, no, 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 look, we're not talking about the Württembergers here.
Wow.
That's positively misleading. I mean, the Saxons could fight extremely hard when
Mhm.
necessary, and they did. I mean, the Saxon military virtue, according to themselves, that is that when the Saxon army is glorifying itself, they talk about Saxon Zähigkeit, toughness,
Okay.
resilience, which is
Okay.
similar to the way the British Army talks about itself. Incidentally, it's like the doggedness on the defense. This is like the
Right.
great virtue. And it shouldn't be forgotten that when 19th Army Corps finally left the Armentières front, they
Okay.
went to the Somme, and they were on the Somme twice, where they suffered appallingly. And the second time at the defense of the Butte de Valencourt in October 1916, which is infamous.
Hmm.
They were there, and they held out. They were subjected to tank attack, and Field Artillery Regiment 77 covered itself in glory. I think they're probably the first German field artillery regiment to kill tanks.
Okay.
And one of their officers is described by the British as continuing to operate his gun alone against the tanks until, and defending himself with his pistol against British infantry until killed.
Wow.
And yes,
Wow.
they were perfectly capable when they needed to be. They shouldn't be caricatured. Um,
Right.
but
Right.
that's part of the problem, because pretty much the only thing that people know about the Saxons, if they know anything about them, is the Christmas truce.
Hmm.
It's the one event of the war where they were present, where their presence is actually recognized. And that's unfortunate, really, because they were in major battles. They did make a major contribution, and they did lose a hell of a lot.
Sure. Of course.
Um, Yeah, 212,783 dead is the official estimate in Saxon
Oh,
Ingrosso out of 2 million total German casualties, approximately.
okay.
Um,
That's minimum 10% killed. Yeah. Yeah. And then
oh,
of
yeah,
course,
well, yeah, dead,
yeah.
dead, one
Yep.
way or the other, dead.
Hmm.
And the total Saxony mobilized, according to Saxon Ingrosso, which is the nearest thing to an official history that exists, because it was written partly by the actual official archivist,
Okay.
in 3 volumes, starting during the war but finishing after it. They mobilized 750,000 total,
Okay.
which is very respectable.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of
mm.
these men was your great grandfather. Um,
Indeed.
could you and Arno Bierast, correct?
That's right. Yes.
And could you
Uh,
tell us a little bit about him? So he was your great grandfather. So I believe you wrote that you were never able to meet him, of course.
oh
Um,
no, he died in the 50s.
okay, yeah, um,
Uh,
yeah. Can you tell us a little about him?
yeah, sure, sure. Well, he was my mother's mother's father.
Okay,
So my maternal grandmother was German. She married a British soldier in Berlin after the war.
okay,
Um, so she told me a lot about her father. I've got quite a lot of photos of him. We have his wartime pictures, and that's what started my interest, of course. He was born in 1889. The family were originally rope makers for multiple generations in a little town called Rosswein, but Arno's father moved to the major Western industrial town of Zwickau
okay,
to work in like the textile industry, we believe. So Arno had like a very respectable like lower or middle class upbringing, vocational education, and he was a white collar worker. He had various roles as clerk and bookmaker starting from his adolescence. It's one
okay.
of the few good written sources I have on him. I've got his CV that he drew up in 1934. So he's
Mm,
got all this, including the reference letters, which is interesting. But the most exciting job he had, I think, was that he went to the German colony of Cameroon in 1912, which must have been an amazing adventure back then. When you wouldn't. All you know of Africa is like black and white photos and like accounts in newspapers and
hmm.
things. It's all very alien and fascinating. But he went over there to work for the Wurman Company, which was basically the reason that the Protectorate of Cameroon existed in the first place. They're the
Okay.
ones that originally established the they had the shipping line that travelled there, on which he travelled. We have his ticket that he saved and photo of the ship, and they also ran trading posts there. So he worked for Vermon originally at Longji on the coast, and then they put him in charge of a trading post in the interior, what they called a factory. So this is like a little establishment with him and one other German
Okay.
and a bunch of local staff, and they were basically trading by barter, I believe, but basic German manufactured goods for raw material, right, rubber primarily. So that's he was doing that, and he caught malaria, and I think he found it much less pleasant than he had hoped. He looks very uncomfortable in the photos, but they're all sitting there in white suits, clearly like sweating heavily and like really drinking quinine, like trying to fend off malaria. But
Right.
he he requested early discharge from his contract and got it, which was fortuitous because otherwise he would have been in Cameroon when the war broke out and
Right.
would
Okay.
probably have been conscripted into the defense of the colony. Now, he didn't actually, he would have been due for military service in like 1909, 1910,
Okay.
but he didn't actually serve. And this is not uncommon because the army only had places for about half of the intake each year.
Oh, okay.
So they were quite, yeah, the army's huge, but the available intake of like the male population is much larger. So they're
Hmm.
quite strict on medical grounds.
Okay.
So I think the fact that he needed glasses is probably what meant that he didn't serve in peacetime. So he left Cameroon and then got a job working as a bookmaker for a firm in Finland, in Helsinki, which is obviously in the Russian Empire.
Sure.
So he was there for a few months, and then the July crisis happened. And he's got a reference saying how we're sad to lose him so soon, but obviously he's decided to go home and serve his country. So he escaped from Finland before Russian internment
Hmm.
became a thing. Got back to Dresden, and evidently volunteered for the artillery. I have a strong suspicion, given I know he was a pragmatic man, that this is him thinking that, oh, well, I could sit and wait for my ersatz reserve call up and be an infantryman,
Right.
or I can volunteer now, perfectly honourably, and be an artilleryman and have a stronger chance of coming home alive.
Correct. Yeah.
I
Makes sense.
suspect that that is the calculus. But he joined Field Artillery Regiment 48, which is headquartered in Dresden. At the time, incidentally, the famous World War II resistance figure, Hans Oster. You heard of him? He was one of the Abwehr conspirators. He was the regimental adjutant of FAR 48 in peacetime, and he'd had a riding accident, so he was at the Ersatzabteilung at the same time as my great grandfather. But so they were training up the new intake, and a bunch of them, including Oster, they all went off to the new Reserve Field Artillery Regiment 53, which is in the book. They went off to Flanders and suffered with the 27 Reserve Corps. My great-grandfather was very lucky. He was sent as reinforcement to the actual Field Regiment 48, the actual field unit,
Okay.
which was on the Ain Valley. So, ironically, he only gets into the book because we managed to get him into the introduction where we cover all the other fronts, because his unit was never in Flanders. He was on the Ain Valley, which was nice, which was pretty quiet in 1915. That's where the other major Saxon Corps, the 12th Army Corps, was there with all that well, it's got the equivalent. It was in the 23rd Division, which is the Saxon equivalent of a Guards Division. They've got the Grenadier regiments and the Schützen Regiment. He was at La Ville-aux-Bois-les-Pont-Vert.
Okay.
It's north of Rams.
Hmm.
I've been there. It's most well known for being the site of like where the French struck in the Nivelle offensive in 1917. There's
Hmm.
a French tank memorial near there.
Yes, but
But
Barry O'Buck. Hmm.
yeah, exactly. Oh, that was Berry-au-Bac was held by the Saxon Light Grenadier Regiment 100 at the time,
Oh,
and the only major action while they were there was the storming of what they called the Berg von la Ville-aux-Bois, the mountain of La Ville-aux-Bois, which was like a very small hill, in March 1916. Which was massively propagandized in the Saxon press because it was the most important thing that these very prestigious units had done since 1914.
okay.
But they eventually, the 12th Army Corps got fed into the Somme gradually from summer 1916. I think my great-grandfather's battery got there in October. So
Ooh,
he was there for like the muddy, cold end of the Somme battle.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then at the end of the year, the regiment got moved to a brand new division, 241st, and they went to the Eastern Front for all of 1917.
Oh,
To
okay.
their very good fortune, definitely the preferential option in 1917. So they were present for the Kerensky offensive, where during which his battery was operating under Austro-Hungarian command for a short period, which must have been interesting. And then in the final Central Powers counteroffensive, which completely broke the Russian Provisional Government's military, drove them right out of Austro-Hungarian territory for good. Massive victory, really good for morale, but absolutely exhausting because they marched ridiculous distances and the horses suffered severely. So they were really exhausted by the end of the year. And one very interesting thing that happened while they were at the quiet period at the end of the year was the Saxon Crown Prince was sent to my great grandfather's regiment for part of his training as he was battery commander over my great grandfather and then battalion commander and was made à la suite of this regiment. So given the right to wear its uniform, although this isn't recorded in the rank lists, but it is in the regimental history, and I have photographic evidence of it.
Whoa.
So
Wow.
he met Crown Prince George. We're quite sure of this. Probably not in any great capacity, but he did meet him.
Wow.
See, Crown Prince George is known from World War II because after the monarchy ended, he became a Catholic priest, and he was a great enemy of the Nazis within the Catholic Church in Germany, and drowned mysteriously in a lake near Berlin in 1944. I think
Oh,
44 or 43. I think
okay.
44.
Okay.
And various parties, including his younger brother, Prince Ernst Heinrich, alleged that the Gestapo had done it. But anyway, so the my great grandfather's division went back to the Western Front in 1918, and then they were in major offensives, and they got absolutely mauled. They were hit by the French and the Americans very severely near Soissons in July the 18th, 1918.
Okay.
And then again by the British and the Australians and the Americans simultaneously at the beginning of October. They received the last Australian infantry attack of the war and one of the few attacks by American heavy tanks, which must have been fun.
Right. Right.
And they were even the batteries of the regiment, as they were credited with holding the line after the infantry had collapsed,
Oh,
but they were actually attacked by British cavalry on. Yeah, there was a British cavalry charge against the battery line during this battle near Montbraham
okay.
in October, which they survived. So they really did go through it. And 48th Field Artillery had the highest losses of any Saxon field artillery unit. So I've gone on about his war service at rather great length, but I should briefly mention what he did afterwards because
Yes.
so he'd already been a member of the DHV trade union, Deutsche Nationale Handlungsgehilfenverband, which was a right-wing white collar union.
Okay.
Um, he was moved up in the ranks of their leadership quite quickly. He took on some very dangerous jobs. They sent him to run one of their branches in Upper Silesia during the insurrection there. So he was
Okay.
supporting the German workers there when there was fighting between Freikorps and Polish insurgents,
Yep.
and he was involved in he was in their leadership in cities in Germany when they were like directly physically threatened by communists.
Oh.
So he had he was clearly a man who was not easily intimidated. But he ultimately rose to become head of the DHV for the entirety of Saxony,
Oh. Wow.
and at which point he so in the by the 30s he was in direct conflict with the Nazis because the Nazi Party was trying to gain control over the union by getting their people into it.
Right.
But in return, the DHV was attempting to defend itself by promoting people who had Nazi Party membership were actually DHV loyalists who had taken out Nazi Party membership for this purpose.
Okay. Understood.
But ultimately, they had to make an agreement with the regime in 1934, which involved sacking a bunch of people who were reckoned to be implacable opponents of the Nazis, which included my great grandfather.
Okay.
So, and the union didn't last much longer after that, but he ended up in Berlin, in Charlottenburg, in fact, I should say, because it wasn't part of Berlin yet at the time,
Hmm.
I think. And working directly with the national head of the union, Max Habermann. And this is how I believe my great grandfather got involved with the conservative opposition to the Nazis, the Goerdeler Circle. And my grandmother remembers being introduced to Goerdeler when the family were living in Leipzig in the 20s. So he did know him, but I don't think Goerdeler knew that my great grandfather was personally involved because otherwise my great grandfather wouldn't have survived because they did get Goerdeler and got names out of him.
Hmm.
We don't know exactly what he did, but we have a lot of testimony in denazification papers, which indicates that he was given a role in the civil service in Berlin during the war. He was offered the choice of going to work for Organisation Tod in
Okay.
Norway or something, I think, or working for the civil service in Berlin. That he used this role to give essential war work exemptions to a bunch of people who were being politically or racially targeted.
Okay.
And I think that this was part of Olbricht's strategy, General Olbricht, who is another Saxon officer, incidentally. He's in our second book. He was in IR 106. But he was in charge of the airsats here, and he moved a lot of his own people into Berlin, into military and governmental positions there with a view towards the coup plan. And my great grandfather was definitely part of the coup plan. We have an affidavit from Jakob Kaiser, who was the founder of the CDU party post-war.
Okay.
And he says that my great grandfather was supposed to have a position in the Goerdeler government in Saxony with responsibility for liquidating the DAF, the Nazi state trade union organization there.
Whoa. Wow.
But the one who knew that my great grandfather's contact was Max Habermann, as I say, and Max Habermann was picked up by the Gestapo after the 20th of July 1944,
Hmm.
and he managed to commit suicide in custody. So they didn't manage to torture him for names, so no one ever came for my great grandfather.
Whoa. Wow. And obviously
Um,
he survives the war, the second war.
he does. He does indeed, and no thanks to well, I can't help mentioning this. No thanks to his parrot, because my great grandfather was continued to be interested in Africa after the war, and he had a lot of contacts with people who still lived over there, and they sent
Okay.
him things. He had a large collection of African artifacts,
Okay.
um, and at some point he got hold of this African grey parrot, which they had called Yakko, and this parrot obviously picked up phrases, and it picked up my great grandfather saying impolitic things.
Oh.
So it
Oh
was,
man.
yeah, things about Hitler. So
Oh
they had
no.
to. My grandmother says they had to give it away, so they gave it away to this deaf old lady who lived in one of the other flats, and it then contented itself with learning to copy the sound of her on the chamber pot.
Oh, gee.
But so yeah, there were comic aspects to it, but they did survive the Battle of Berlin. They
Wow.
survived like brutal air raiding.
Mhm.
Yeah, their building. My grandmother showed me the building they lived in during World War II, and she is very proud of the fact that it was still there because her and her father had been up on the roof putting fire bombs into a bucket of sand,
Whoa.
and she got like a commendation from civil defense for that.
Wow. What lives? The like
Yes.
what lives?
I know my grandmother, she would occasionally say things about the Battle of Berlin where she'd clearly seen some extremely bad stuff, but occasionally she would talk about it, and only with me. I mean, no one else would ever raise these subjects, but I was young and stupid, and occasionally she would like say things about what she'd witnessed, and clearly been very, really quite harrowing.
Right. Right.
But her father had taken most of it in his stride. He sort of describes him in the air raid shelter with the other veterans playing Skat, which is this interminable card game that German soldiers play that
Hmm.
I've tried very hard to learn from Jürgen, but I'm not German enough to understand it. I think it's like a very complicated version of bridge.
Okay.
Um, that, even like very like, even very simple like German German soldiers during World War One had no trouble with it, but it just completely escapes me. But yeah, he was playing interminable rounds of Skat with other veterans in the air raid shelter, like completely indifferent, well, appearing indifferent to the sounds of the bombing.
Wow.
That's obviously part of it's clearly a brave face for the family, but
Sure.
he's learned to cope with these things. Um,
Wow.
there's clearly a lot more we don't know. Like, she describes him like throwing his pistol into the Landwehr Canal so that he wouldn't be found armed by the Russians. We know he avoided his Volkssturm call up somehow, but we're not sure how.
Okay.
Um, we know the reason he went through denazification was because he was on the books of the SA Reserve, and
Okay.
there's correspondence of him writing to the SA wanting to be removed from it and eventually achieving that. And I believe the reason is because the thing he's not saying is that I believe he was in the Stahlhelmbund, because
Oh,
when the Stahlhelmbund was taken over by the Nazis, they took all of the war veteran membership and put them onto the rolls of the SA Reserve automatically.
okay.
And I think he was involved with paramilitary stuff in the 20s because one time I looking at a picture of an MP18 in a book and my grandmother recognized that. He says, "Oh, my father had one of those under the bed when we lived in I think she said in Leipzig
Oh,
or maybe so
oh, wow.
yeah."
Okay.
Yes, so, they were very popular for political assassinations in the Weimar Republic. The army wasn't allowed to have them, but the police were, and obviously a lot of paramilitary forces had them illegally.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I wonder who he was hiding that for.
Whoa.
But yeah, you see, there's a lot we don't know. But he just became an insurance agent after World War II and died peacefully in 1959. And my mother met him as a child. We came to see my grandparents in Crawley in Sussex, where they lived, and she said she remembers him as a lovely, patient old man. But this
Wow.
is all stuff I've had to piece together. But as you can see, it's terribly incomplete. Like the photos are very incomplete. We just
Of
have
course.
some from. We've got the one of him leaving for the front, which is in the book, at the railway station, October 1914. We've got a bunch from the front in 1915, all from that same area around La Ville-aux-Bois. One from 16 before they went to the Somme, and then after that, no others. And there were empty spaces in the album, so
Ah,
we don't have any of the late war pictures. Really sad. There's nothing from, we know he was in Galicia, and I think that's where he learned to speak Russian, which we know he could.
wow.
So he was on the Eastern Front and he picked it up there, but we have no pictures from that, which is really sad because they were in some really interesting places.
Wow.
Um,
Just amazing. Amazing. What a God, the people who lived through through these decades, the First World War, the interwar period, the Second War, just I've heard so many stories and they're just like, like, yeah, like, I work with people who work with one colleague who said like, yeah, we found out my aunt was like a spy for the British during the Second War and she like never even mentioned it. Like we found all this after she
yeah,
passed away and like these
it's
lives that
really not uncommon, is it?
no.
They put these things away privately and don't talk about them.
Yeah.
Like
Wow.
my I mean my grandmother said like her father very rarely talked about the First World War. It was like, it's just the odd story. Like he told her once about being very hungry in 1918 and being invited by some infantrymen to share a stew with them, and it turned out to be their officer's dog that had been killed by enemy action. That
Wow. And they ate it up. Yeah.
yes, though not such an immense not. Artillerymen didn't suffer that way so much because they tended to get the first choice on like fatally wounded horses.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
Mm.
Right. Right. Wow. Wow. Amazing. Andy, what is your next project? I mean, you have any choice of things here that any sort of like rabbit hole that you could go down. The
Yeah, there's a vast amount of things I could usefully be doing if I had the time. Obviously, I have to work for a living. I can't. I know these books have made like no money. It's wonderful reviews, but people don't buy them.
oh, that's too bad. We have
But
yeah. Yeah, no, I understand. There's a running joke with my buddy Rob and I. Like we always say, like no, nobody gets rich on World War One. So
Yeah, I mean, Jack Sheldon is like the one man who like sells enough, and he says he makes like a modest amount from his books, and he's like the absolute king in this field. He's like and he's not doing very well from it. But so I would really like to be able to write further books, but it's just a really enormous struggle to manage it. I mean,
right.
we've got ongoing projects.
Hmm.
One that Jürgen has that I'm assisting with is we're working on the Saxon 40th Division's divisional cemetery at Quainwell-sur-Darle with the data there. Like we've
Oh,
got the full list of everyone who's buried there, and Jürgen has been systematically like correctly identifying them and working out their stories, putting names and putting faces to them where possible, because Jürgen has this very large collection of like regional published rolls of honor,
okay.
and they've got a lot of references and regimental histories and things. He's been able to get material on a lot of them, so he's got a little steadily growing virtual publication that he's like produced as a booklet a few times. He doesn't think it's ever going to be like something that anyone would want to publish properly, but I was saying maybe a big memorial website or something, because it's an amazing site there. It's your typical idea of a German cemetery is one of these sad concentration cemeteries where the men have been moved there from all over the place and their
Right.
names are misspelled and there's no connection to the units or anything. But this is the original cemetery of 40th Infantry Division as laid out by Lieutenant Stock, who was an architect, with the trees pretty much as he intended, and the divisional memorials are in there as well. And it's it's from when they were at Plugsteat Wood. It's to the east of Plugsteat Wood. So it's the direct counterpart of the British cemeteries there, but hardly anyone knows it exists. So we're hoping to change that.
And what is the
Uh,
name of the
Yoga,
cemetery again?
Quainwar-sur-Derl.
Okay.
You'll find it's mentioned in the book quite a lot.
Okay.
Um, yeah, Quainwar. It's generally called, but the to the Saxons, they couldn't pronounce French names,
Hmm.
so it's Genoa.
Genoa.
Mhm.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yes, they could pronounce the Flemish names were no problem, but the French ones are difficult. Like Van Brechy, that was Von Bierschis.
Okay. Okay. Oh, interesting.
Peronchy was Berenschis. Uh, it's
Oh,
very similar
fascinating.
to Tommy's, but yeah.
Wow.
Uh,
Andy, amazing, amazing. Gosh, your depth of knowledge here, which I know is in the book. I'm working my way through the book. I apologize. It's not out of a lack of
oh,
interest. It's a lack of time. I have a
that's all right.
day job as well, and I've it was in the queue, and I just couldn't read fast enough. But
Yeah. And
man, what?
there's a second one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, folks, so the book is Fighting the Kaiser's War, The Saxons in Flanders, 1914 through 1918. You can order it
Hmm.
wherever books are sold, and a link to it
Yep.
will be available in the show notes.
Hmm.
So do go out and do buy a copy, because
Yeah.
this is like an incredible resource, and is from this episode here, you can hear the amount of passion and the amount of work that Jurgen and yourself, Andy, that you guys have put into
Oh
this.
gosh. It was
So
a substantial chunk of our lives getting this thing out the door, and
yeah.
the second one as well. But
Oh,
I should mention that the our publisher is Pen and Sword, and the North American distribution is via Casemate Publishing.
Casemate Publishing.
So,
Okay.
mm,
So we'll link right to that. Perfect.
mm. But I suspect that all your whatever military book distributors you have there, whatever specialist catalogs you have there, and whoever runs like particular military bookshops will have it over there.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
And the second one, For King and Kaiser, which is
For King
an
and Kaiser.
expansion. Yeah, it's like the first one is comprehensive, and the second one we go into like areas where we have a special rich depth of material, like specific locations, specific units, specific periods where we have a lot that we could only cover it briefly in the first one. We just go massively in depth.
Wow.
Like we go into Plugsteat Wood in much greater depth, for example.
Wow.
There's some lovely, lovely trench photos from the early weeks of trench warfare, which I find absolutely fascinating, with
Yeah.
the really rudimentary trenches and the rudimentary trench clothing with lots of very unofficial gear,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh,
Wow.
sandbags wrapped around legs, and all this kind of thing.
Interesting. Interesting.
Mm.
Wow. Well, fascinating. Fascinating. Andy, thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening. My gosh. I'm,
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm assuming it's getting late here, but like,
Oh
thank,
yeah, it's nearly 10 here, but that's
oh my God,
absolutely.
I'm so sorry. And you have work.
Oh,
Uh,
oh no, it's quite all right. That's a very pleasant way to spend my evening.
Fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hmm.
All right.
Cheers.